platform built specifically to help restaurants unify scheduling, labor compliance, and team engagement with one single tool. We don't see a lot of that out there these days. Anthony has a very unique founder story. He started in software engineering with game hacking, went on to found multiple tech companies, and ultimately built TimeForge to solve real-world labor challenges at the intersection of both HR and restaurant ops. He's a big believer in data-driven decision-making and empathy-led leadership, especially in this industry where manager tenure keeps shrinking and technology adoption isn't always consistent. That might be an understatement. I love talking to Anthony because not only do I learn something every time we talk, but he's always really good at inspiring some challenger thinking. Fun fact, Anthony grew up all over the world, including a few years in Cairo and Egypt, and also has a blue and gold macaw, which is also known as a pirate bird that can live up to 80 years. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. That's a heck of an intro. I need to start paying you to do that for me anywhere I go, walking in a restaurant. Yeah.
I feel like you have an AI tool that can already do that better than me. Let's get right to this. What is like the one thing you're in talking to lots of restaurants, you're involved with lots of companies. What's the one thing that restaurants get right when it comes to retaining employees? A lot of people ask, what do they get wrong? What do they get right?
What do they get right? Well, I would say when you're talking about like hourly employees moving their way up, there's usually a lot of opportunities, even with small chains. Like there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of, hey, to get to that next level, this is what you should do. Although we talk a lot about turnover in the industry, that turnover actually helps create a lot of upward momentum for many employees. So if you are looking to get into the restaurant industry and then you want to move up, often you can do that relatively easily. And I think they get that right. The other thing that they get right a lot is a lot of states and the National Restaurant Association and all the state associations do a lot of training. And so there's a lot of focus on training to help you drive your consistency. And that ends up being kind of a big thing. Like everybody gets trained. It's often other industries that we operate in, that's not always the case. There's actually really poor training programs.
Yeah, I want to make sure I heard that correctly. You're saying there's good training available in our industry and other industries need to take a look at what we do. Did I just hear that?
I think that's true. I think that's really true. And I think it's especially as you look around food safety and, you know, all the OSHA stuff and slip and falls and all the things that make restaurant operators really pay attention to those pieces, those things where there's lots of high risk. I think we do a lot of training that other industries, I mean, I don't know if you've ever called a carpenter or an electrician out to your house and had them come work on something. Like you get some crazy stories, or a pool repair guy. And I mean, even these franchises that operate pool companies, like they don't get the level of training that we get in our industry. Yes, training is aspirational. You can always have more. And then when you have too much, like nobody ever says anything about it because they never get too much, by the way. Yeah, I think we get that stuff right.
I love to do that. By the way, if we had done this podcast at like 10:30 yesterday morning, there was a guy with a ladder out this window fixing something on the roof of the building. And every time I looked out, it was like wobbly and like not pressed against the wall that I felt safe. So I watched it happen. He hopefully didn't fall, at least not in here, but he may have in the neighborhood. But hopefully his training can be inspired by our conversation. Let's take it up a notch. We just talked about what do we get right. What's one thing that sets the top restaurants apart? Like when there's an organization that really nails it, like what are they doing or how does that look?
Nails it from the employee perspective?
Or would training, retention, any of this kind of stuff. I mean, we're really talking about retaining employees, but the ones that really are good about keeping employees, what are they doing right? Like super right?
Yeah, super right. This is I mean, we are in the restaurant industry, but it turns out that paying employees well, like matters. And then it also matters that they're not having to commute a long ways, right? So those two things kind of go hand in hand, right? If I have a low wage job and I'm having to drive 20 miles, that's not going to help. The other thing with retention, though, is that once you get through the dollars and cents, if we just kind of assume everybody's making about the same, they're not, but assuming they're all making about the same, then you start getting into what are the other opportunities? Are you helping me with soft skills? Are you helping coach me? I mean, you know this from your time in the industry, you can go find a number of brands that spun out general managers And those general managers are operating partners of, say, Outback, which did this for a number of years, right? You got Red Lobster guys that spun out of those brands and went on to go build their other brands, and they really knew those systems. And so when you start looking at, they were doing employee reviews on a continual basis, they were giving feedback, they were growing their soft skills and their leadership training, and you end up growing up this culture that instead of treating the team like disposable, turn and churn. Like when you view the workforce that way, then you're just going to end up with a crummy experience all around.
Yeah, for sure. I used to work with a independent restaurant group here in New York City that had legit like the top 10 most popular Irish pubs in the city. And every one of them it was almost like a Ponzi scheme. Like they opened one, they opened a second one, they opened a third one. Then they like took the GM. They're like, do you want to go open one? We'll fund it. We'll be your partner. And then he taught somebody, and all of a sudden they had 10 pubs, and they weren't all on the same ownership, but it was the same system. And essentially they let a GM graduate, and they said, here's a check. You know what I mean?
Right.
I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, what a smart system. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're growing with their people. They're not putting artificial roadblocks up to go, well, you haven't been here 4 years yet. So because you haven't been here 4 years, the next band that you're going to graduate into, which is a system made by an HR person that wasn't really, it was designed by, not an operator, right? Probably. But you run into those systems in corporate America all the time. You got to be here 3 years and 9 months to be able to go to the next level. Why? That's the people who are great are going to leave because they don't want to deal with that. But the people who are not great are going to be like, oh, great. Well, in 3 more days, I get to get upgraded to, cook number 4. And nobody wants to do that.
The other thing that I thought was cool about that group, just a sort of a tangential note here, is because the systems were similar, they never had an employee problem because if this place somebody called out, they just borrowed one from the other restaurant. Even though the concepts were different, the systems were the same. So if like I was short because 6 people got the flu, I could call the other Irish pub, like, can I borrow somebody? I was like, this is genius. Everybody needs to do this.
Yeah. I was discussing with a coworker the other day about gig work. We're doing gig work inside the medical field. The example we were using had to do with a dentistry practice, and you break a tooth. Like, believe it or not, the fix for a broken tooth is the same in New York as it is here in Texas, as it is in Alberta, Canada. And so getting a dentist or a dental worker to handle a broken tooth does not require a lot of retraining. But if you bring in someone who wants to run your bar and you have a flaming mojito and you make it this certain way, right? And somebody wants to know all the details around it, and then the next bar over doesn't have a flaming mojito, they have a gin and tonic thing, whatever. And like, they're not the same. It requires a lot of extra training, a lot of extra things that go in. And so it's harder then to get people up and onboarded, and those systems become more difficult. Maybe makes the experience more interesting for your customers, but it's harder.
Let's take that before I start asking silly questions about flaming mo's, which I have had. Let's talk about staffing. Let's segue a little bit. How important do you think is forecasting sales when it comes to staffing? Like, how do I make sure I have the right amount of people, right? Like, what does that look like? Or how do you think about it?
Yeah, look, you've got to always have a minimum number of people to run your organization, right? Like, you probably are not running a full service kitchen and restaurant with like one person. Like that would be a really rough day. So you gotta have some minimums that you got to bring in, but knowing the forecast of what you're going to do from a sales perspective, either start big, right? What are we doing for monthly, right? That's going to help you with your budgeting. Work that way backwards into your week, work that down into a day and a day part, and trying to figure out what your levels need to be. Call me old school. We've been doing this since 2007, but like, I don't know how you build a schedule. I don't know how you know what to staff. I don't know how you know who to hire unless you have a reasonable forecast. So you need to know the forecast so that you can figure out who to staff and which departments and which positions. And that seems that having the accurate forecast, you start shaving off a couple points here and there. Those are material dollars. You start, you got $1 million, $2 million, $5 million business, and you're saving a couple points on your labor because you're forecasting properly. And they're not massive changes. We're talking about bringing somebody in 15 minutes later, having them go home 10 minutes earlier. Like it's probably not even material to the staff, but it's material to your bottom line at the end of the year.
I think people probably think of it as like, oh, well, Jim asked for 3 shifts and I can only give him 1 to make my margins. You're talking about go home 10 minutes early. Like,
Right. That's right. Yeah, we're talking about go home 10 minutes. And it's funny is like, you know this, you've got a restaurant, like you stick your head out and you go, hey, who wants to go home now? I don't, we don't think we need you. Like someone is going to put their hand up and be like, I get to go see, whatever. I get to go do something 10 minutes earlier. So I mean, we're not talking about major cost cutting changes. We're talking about just really paying attention to the forecasts and the ups and the downs throughout the day so that you're properly staffed there.
Do you think in some cases it's just a GM or whoever's in charge of scheduling, like, I know the business. I know Fridays we need this. Do you think that's part of the reason we got here?
Yeah, it's it's the gut feel, right? And I think if you've been in a business a long time, gut feel like is good. Like you do know the ebbs and flows of the business. You know that there's a high school track competition across the street and they're going to bring in a whole bunch of people this weekend. And you know what those things are. But COVID changed the game for everybody. You had a whole bunch of managers exit. Average tenure of a manager in the hospitality space dropped from like 8 or 9 plus years to like 2.5. And so these are folks who don't know what's going on in the industry. They don't know what's going on in your restaurant. And you're asking them to take the 2 most expensive things, somebody buying inventory and somebody scheduling labor, 2 most expensive. I mean, you can't change the rent. The electricity is not changing, right? You might be able to lever marketing up and down a little bit, but that's kind of it.